Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's nice to see you here tonight. I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. This is Carlos Calmar, who happens to be the music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Coincidence. Good evening.
Amazing how we just happened to run into each other here tonight.
Wow.
So what we have tonight is a classic example, I think, of a concert where there's tremendous variety, and yet it all will hang together nicely. And I know that that's exactly how you like to do it.
Yeah, actually, it's a great program with a lot of unknown music, I would say.
Works for me.
Well, because or let's say not unknown, but little known. The Bloch Concerto, probably first timer.
Yeah. We have with us tonight Ernest Bloch's grandson and his daughter and his wife, and a violinist named Joshua Friedlander, who wrote his doctoral dissertation on this concerto.
Yeah, and
Sarah Kwok, who's warming up backstage.
Yeah, and I'm kind of always, when Ernie Bloch is here, I'm like, I hope I don't say anything wrong about the great composer. Because these people just dedicate so much time to the work of Ernest Bloch, and it's very interesting work, but I have a program full of other music too, which is interesting too.
And I really like that you set up the Bloch Violin Concerto with Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun by Debussy, because A, it's beautiful, and B, Bloch was very much influenced by Debussy, especially early in his career. That's perfect.
Well, actually, if we start by the Bloch Concerto, Bloch is a composer who, everybody knows that probably when you live in Oregon. He spent the last 20 years of his life on the Oregon coast. Therefore, he's an Oregonian.
Right.
Well, his output, his music is, first of all, I would have kind of trouble labeling music as Oregonian. I don't know exactly where we are with that, especially not during the time when Bloch wrote his pieces. And second, his music is actually quite far removed from anything that is Oregonian, because his music most of the time shows something about his Jewish heritage. His most famous pieces are all related to Judaism. And the funny thing about this violin concerto that you are going to hear, which is quite the monster of a piece, it's a big, meaty piece, is that he, when asked, he said, there is nothing Jewish in it. Only to then read the newspapers of the premiere, who said, it's a very Jewish piece. Bad luck. Essentially, what he wanted to portray somewhat, or let's say what he wanted to utilize, is Native American, American Indian kind of motives, and create his own shtick, which he did. But you can, at the end of the day, you cannot deny where you come from. And the Americanism, if you will, is first of all maybe some rhythmic elements here and there. And the other very, very American element, at least in my own, the way I read the piece, is Hollywood happens in the piece.
Well, it's interesting. I had that same reaction, and so did Sarah. She mentioned that to me, that some of it has this kind of cinematic Western quality to it. Some of it's big and grand, big statements, and the use of the orchestra is wonderful. I've never heard this thing live, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, that's one of the key signatures that Bloch does very well, utilizing the orchestra and painting colors all over the map. That is something that he does really, really well. But the first time I listened to this piece, I thought...
Which was how long ago?
Not long ago. Sorry, nobody asked me to study the Bloch Concerto. I thought, oh, here are the pyramids, and then the workers come and stuff happens. And then, of course, I thought, oh, Hollywood, Charlton Heston is going to come.
It's a vivid imagination.
Yeah.
So did Ernest Bloch. He is such an interesting composer. The longer I live, the more I like his music, the more I appreciate the depth and profundity and seriousness of it, and that he was so true to himself. And I interviewed his daughter 20 years ago, one of his daughters, and she quoted him as saying something to the effect that he would say to composers, the harder you try to be fashionable now, the sooner you're going to be unfashionable later. And he was
Wise.
never concerned about being fashionable. I mean, 1930s violin concerto
I would
based
say
on
that
Native American themes?
No good composer actually cares about that.
Hope not.
Because at least not when you write
You don't either, judging from that shirt.
I'm happy if that shirt.
Ooh, that was rude, I'm sorry.
I don't care. as long as my wife looks at me and doesn't say like,
She's playing tonight. She's
yes,
one of the violinists.
Yeah, she's backstage. Yeah. But anyway, so there is the Bloch, and we set it up with L'après-midi d'Enfant, which is a tiny 10-minute piece by Claude Debussy that revolutionized the world. That's how you do it. Because if you think that when you want to revolutionize the world, you have to write a monstrosity, a phenomenal monstrosity like Sacre de Printemps, Rite of Spring, like Stravinsky did, just think again. This little piece actually changed the world. Just because nobody before dared to utilize, first of all, this form, which is, as short as it is, it's a multiform. It's many layers of form, one on top of each other. And second, nobody ever dared to use harmony in this daring way. And certainly nobody dared before this to instrumentate this way. And he made the life of flutists. There is the life of flutists before L'après-midi and after.
That solo at the beginning is pretty exposed and quite lovely. Yeah. I think of this as one of the pieces that launched 20th century music just like 6 years early or something like that. It was 1890s. Gorgeous, wonderful, gossamer work. Is it hard to conduct?
Well, first of all, you know me. There is no such thing as easy to conduct.
Not if you want to do it well and you want to do everything well.
I actually realized that having conducted this piece on occasion throughout the last 30 years, I do now things completely differently. Which I only, first of all, I probably risk considerably more. You know, this is a very technical terminology. When you are very young and you have a piece like this, you tend to want to lead all the time instead of actually trusting. Never mind, things will happen. And you're like, this prélude après-midi, and you're like, and the flutist is like, what are you doing? Until you get a little older and...
It's a metaphor for life here. Don't worry, nothing is under control.
Yeah, and essentially, aside from the very beginning, just whatever you think you will do as a conductor, please don't do it. Leave the flute player alone. They know.
Interesting.
The only thing that you say is you just listen and then you say something about it if you think you have to say something about it.
Who's the flutist?
Martha, Martha has been with us pretty much for most of the season when I'm on the podium. And she is how can I call her? The designated principal flutist of the Oregon Symphony. Mm-hmm. And it's really good to have her here. And essentially, all I do is like, go.
So she'll be here all the time next season?
Yeah.
Yay, good. Okay.
And then the piece the piece is based on poetry by Mallarmé, and the poetry is based on a painting, which hangs in the London Gallery.
Oh, have you seen it?
No.
I want to go there and see that.
That would be a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and essentially, I thought, well, tonight's program, what ties tonight's program together, aside from adventurous, lots of colors, yes, a lot of variety. And then I thought, well, one thing that definitely ties the program together at both ends is actually something that I always have to be very careful how to phrase it, eroticism and sexuality.
Oh, yeah, that's true. The fawn,
The fawn.
daydreaming about those nymphs. Did he seduce them or did he just dream it?
Yeah, he fell asleep.
And the music is very languorous and sensuous. So now you're going to talk about the Miraculous Mandarin.
And then comes the Miraculous Mandarin, which is, it's kind of, if Debussy's over there with his painting of what this is, Bartok is probably way down on the waterfront, as far away as you can. And we do one little thing tonight, which probably is interesting. We play Copland's Quiet City, and we go attacca without applause into the Bartok. And it's one of the crazy ideas. And
He likes to do that once in a while, and sometimes it can be so effective.
well, the thing is, Quiet City describes exactly what you think it describes, a quiet city. It's based on a play that actually never made it to the theater, but it's essentially a quiet city with a nervous trumpeter. Because the first time the trumpet plays in this piece, actually Copland writes mysterious, nervous. That's what he writes. And it's because of what the play actually tells you. The play, so Copland was always very interested in theater at a certain point in his life, and he got to be a really good friend with people like Lee Strasberg. And Lee Strasberg and friends of his created a group called The Group. And Irvin Shaw wrote a theater play for them, which is The Quiet City. Now, The Quiet City had, I think, 2, maybe 3 performances, kind of as a tryout, and then disappeared. And Copland had written incidental music for all of it, and Copland said to himself, too bad, actually my music is good, so let me extract what I can from what I wrote. So on one side, he created this tiny little piece that you're going to hear tonight, which is called A Quiet City, and other melodies he utilized in another piece of his, which is called Appalachian Spring. And the great thing about Quiet City is it's actually this kind of against the background of a big, quiet, peaceful city. Is a story of 2 brothers. One of them is very successful, but in denial of his heritage. Gabe Mellon, his name, and the other is David Melnikov. Essentially, both are Melnikovs, but one wanted to Americanize his last name so nobody knows where he comes from. And Melnikov is actually the trumpeter. And life doesn't go so well for him. And throughout the piece of Copland, the trumpet's role is not only to portray Mr. Melnikov himself, but portray what you see, different personalities that you see in a city. Set behind, against the landscape, I would say, it's very clearly at night, the entire piece.
Thinking of that Edward Hopper painting of the diner with just a few people in it.
A few people, exactly. Yeah. And the piece starts very quietly and ends that way. And of course, you can do the piece on its own. But when you have the Miraculous Mandarin following that act, which is set up in a city, just the sheer contrast of the 2 cities blows your mind. It's just amazing, because as quiet as the Copland and as harmonious as it partly is, as kind of horrible the Bartok is. I know, I remember this, you can say it again. This gentleman always told me years ago when we talked about this Bartok, he said, I think this is the ugliest piece of music ever written. Remember?
I'm sorry you remember that, Carlos. That's interesting. Well, and there's the story, which for me works like the Miraculous Mandarin. I file in the category of why. Life is hard enough. Why do people write stories of such brutality? And then we set them to music and we choreograph them and we pay our hard-earned dollars to go sit through them. Like Rigoletto is a horrible story.
But very pretty music.
Yeah, he tells the story with catchy tunes. Verdi was amazing that way. But you know what I mean? I'm a wimp about these things.
Actually, I am, first of all, I'm more in the corner that, not always, but on occasion, art in general has to be a portray. The possibility of art is the possibility of portraying society.
The human experience.
Everything. And there is, first of all, just talking about the times in which we live, it's messy, just to say the least. Right? Well, the interesting thing is, if the starting point for the Miraculous Mandarin is a piece of literature. And if you think that on our day and age, things we read in a book, sometimes in an essay, nothing can shock us anymore. And I'm not talking about the news. I'm talking about things that a writer imagines and that are just vivid and very graphic. You think, oh, nothing can shock us. Now, the shocking thing is, well, that happened in 1910 already, because the story of the Miraculous Mandarin, written by the Hungarian Menihert Lengyel, later Melchior Lengyel when he lived in America, is, whoa. I mean, thinking about graphic, it's pretty much the most graphic thing that you can even imagine. So, in a nutshell, what is the piece about? I know you're like, tell us. That the piece is actually, it's the scenery of a very brutal city, lots of anger in the piece, and it's the story about three thugs who, with the help of a prostitute, look for money. And they lure, with the help of this young girl, they lure men into a room and try to rob the man. And, well, the first two men that appear simply have no money in their pockets. So they are being thrown out. And then comes the Mandarin, and the Mandarin scares the girl to an extent that is, just his appearance must be so dramatically horrible, you will hear that. And what happens is that, of course, the Mandarin comes to this room for the girl, so he wants something that you probably can imagine. And the thugs want something else. And during what happens till the end of the piece, the point is that the thugs try to rob him unsuccessfully. Then they try to smother his face, and nothing really happened. Then they run a rusty sword through his body in order to kill him, and he doesn't die. Then they hang him from a chandelier, and he's still alive. And then the girl does something to him, which I leave to your imagination, and then he dies, and that's the end. And thinking about lurid stories, that's one. Now, what you're going to hear tonight is the suite, which is not all of this, which in terms of the effect of the music is phenomenal, but the entire ending is missing. So it is The suite, as written by Bartók, ends with the first struggle between the Mandarin and the girl. So all these stories about what the thugs do to the Mandarin later don't happen.
Why do you think he left that off?
Because he wanted to write us. I mean, this is a piece of. It's a piece of. It's a theatrical piece, and he needed to compress things a little bit. And if you hear the entire piece, what is missing for a reason is at the end, when he dies, is kind of like a climax. It's kind of anticlimactic somewhat. It's just like and dead. And you'll hear what happens tonight. Tonight it's like this struggle is so incredibly visceral that it's like a very brutal dance that really ends with pure brutality. And you think, what happened to those people in the early 1900s, that they write something like this? And yes, you say, well, life is hard enough. Why do we need to hear something? Well, actually, I think you need to hear it because it's absolute stunning music. It's maybe not very beautiful, but I think that it's very important to understand that music is a tool to express emotions very often. And in this piece, that is all the time there. It's highly emotional music. Just because of the topic, the music might not be, it might not sound like Debussy's Afternoon of a Faun, which is just prettiness, just wonderful nymphs, girls. This one is a little bit different. And of course, when the piece was finally premiered, exactly what you think would happen, it happened. So first of all, the piece was not premiered, I think, until 1926, which is pretty much 7 years after it was written. And it was not premiered in Hungary either, where the authors are from. It was premiered in Cologne, in Germany, and caused a scandal of gigantic proportions. Because, well, I mean, it was in a way enacted. It was not, this is just a piece of music. But if you see visually something which is bloody murder, well, it's troubling. So, and then the piece disappeared, and then it came back again in Prague, also not very successful. And then the piece disappeared for 20 years, until after World War II. Unfortunately, Bartók was dead at that time. And then everything took off, and everything was very, very successful. And Bartók himself always said, this is the best piece I have written. It is just an amazing piece of music on a topic that it is what it is. But if you think about it, topics like this happen throughout theatrical pieces all the time. To find operas that are actually funny is hard. But operas are mostly very tragic. Sometimes they are very funny because, like Verdi or others, because the story is like, oh my God, no, Troubadour. Try to explain that one. But people die all over. And in this one, people die as well. This is what it is.
True story. A friend of mine recently retired. He was a mail carrier for many years, walked the same route delivering mail, and along the way, somehow he got into classical music, partly through listening to my little radio station, but also by coming to concerts. And one of the first concerts he heard was an Oregon Symphony performance of the Miraculous Mandarin. Now, here's somebody who you might think would be frightened away by this music. He adored it. It totally turned him on to classical music, like The Rite of Spring does for some teenagers, as it did for me. I just think that's so cool that this thing that I, who love so much modern music, kind of have trouble with, this guy just totally loved it. He got it.
I actually understand that very much because, first of all, just getting back to The Rite of Spring. The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky is, on our day and age, on pretty much everybody's list of 50 favorite pieces. But it caused the biggest scandal in classical music when it was premiered. And still to this day, I think it's a strike of pure genius, not really pretty, I think.
Not really.
Not really. It's very visceral, and the parts that are lyrical are sometimes very eerie. So that's fine. And in terms of what your friend said, well, the funny thing is, what would happen? Now it cannot happen because you're here and you heard what it is about. What would happen if you do not read the program notes and you do not hear from the two of us what the piece is about, and you hear the Miraculous Mandarin? I wonder, because I actually think exactly what you said would happen. First, it's like, whoa. And then you get in, and then you get into all this clarinet. Clarinet is a very important instrument in the Miraculous Mandarin. And you think like, wow, something amazing, and I don't know what it is. Happens to me all the time. When I go sometimes to concert and I don't know what the piece is, and I don't recognize it either, but I can hear something that is palpable, and it's great music. And just to get back to the idea, the contrast between the quiet city of Copeland and Bartók's Miraculous Mandarin is actually phenomenal, because I personally like very much juxtapositions, things that essentially don't belong at all together, but speak somewhat of the same theme. You might not remember, I did that to you many, many years ago, where I played Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, but with the Survivor from Warsaw by Schoenberg before. And it's all, in the end, about context, because context gives you a very different view at things. And the quietness of the city, and then the city just turns completely upside down, and it's bustling, and it's in your face, and it's harsh and lurid and all of that.
How glad are you that you came tonight to this? Thank you for being here. You're going to love the concert. There are CDs available in the lobby. Carlos Kalmar.
Robert McBride.
Thank you.